Hello, and welcome to the Quest for Games. I'm Jerry, and in this video, I'm going to do final thoughts and what's going to wind up being kind of a review of the 1 to 4 player game Dice Throne Adventures. I did a video for the how to play. I actually did a quick and a regular teach of it, and the regular teach just was too long, and I cut it into sections. So this is basically the third part. I have one for the dungeon crawl, one for the boss fight, and then one for this review, final thoughts kind of thing. So with that said, what is Dice Thrones Adventures? For those people who didn't go through the first two or any of the other videos, Dice Thrones Adventures is a dungeon crawl and then a boss fight. And you'll do that 4 times. Dungeon crawl, boss fight, repeat 4 times through 4 different bosses at the end of each dungeon crawl. You use the Dice Throne characters, which you can see in other videos of mine, how you play the Dice Throne characters, but you can use any one of the Dice Throne characters you may own to go through this dungeon crawl and then do the boss fights. The dungeon crawls are a little challenging of a dungeon crawl, but they're pretty much the same as most dungeon crawls if you're used to a dungeon crawl. You flip tiles over, you move into the room tells you something to do to set up the room, gives you rewards, usually sets up a minion. You have to have a fight with that minion, and then you can move on. And if you want more, 2 other videos out there by me that'll teach you how to do that. At the end of a dungeon crawl, which, like I said, they're a little challenging, but if you successfully complete a dungeon crawl, you can move on to the boss fight. If you don't, you get some loot and you go try the dungeon crawl again, similar to what we refer to as a roguelike now. When this was built, I'm not 100% sure that term was coined yet, but it's kind of like a roguelike. You go through the dungeon. If you don't succeed, you get some loot, which beefs up your characters, and then you go through it again. When you get to the boss fight, you're basically fighting something that's similar to a character, but it's a powered up version of the character so that you can have 1 to 4 Dice Thrones characters trying to fight it at the same time. There's an interesting mechanism that you use to level up that character, and then you basically have a 4 against 1 boss fight. So let's talk about the build quality. The build quality is very good. The game comes with trays. There's this tray for all your status tokens and different tokens. There's a caddy that has all the cards in it, including all of the cards from what you need to when you're flipping a minion and the dungeon tiles and all that. It's all in one nice caddy. There's a tray that has the bosses in it, and then there's a tray that has the health dials and the dice and things like that that you need to be able to play the minions and the bosses. So all well organized. The dungeon tiles are a nice thick piece of cardboard, like a main board. They're not the thin cardstock kind of a thing. I have had a few dungeon crawls where the dungeon rooms are a cardstock, and those don't tend to stick as well to the table or stay around as well. This is nice thick cardboard, like a board game's main board. The cards that are in this are the same quality of cards that are in the base Dice Thrones character games. So that's the build quality. It's good. If I'm going to do my rating, I do the rating. The 1 is, and I'm thinking about having to flip this, but 1 is a game that I really liked and I want to get on the table as often as I can. And 5 is a game that's not really for me. I would put this one squarely between a 3 and a 2, leaning up towards the 2. You have to have a lot to get into it. And I have other dungeon crawls that I like a little better. But, you have to have the characters from Dice Thrones, and then you have to buy this game too. It is nice that if you're already into the Dice Throne universe and you have some of the Dice Throne characters, you can take those characters now and put them into a dungeon crawl. So the your beloved character that you play PvP, you can now put into a cooperative dungeon crawl. That's nice. I'll go through some positives. One of the positives is it gives me something else to do with my Dice Throne characters. The way that it's arranged feels like you're playing Dice Throne. The minions, when they come out, they have a dice objective or roll objective. which makes it kind of feel like it's the same as when you're playing your own characters. And some of the minions are tough, which gives you some strategies. If you watched one of my videos, you see the lizard mage came out. It can get 6 chaos tokens on it, so it does 6 damage every time. And that's a green level 1 kind of a minion. But if you let him get away and stack, you start out with 18 health. So if he gets that 6 damage onto your character 2-3 times, your character's done for, which makes him very difficult to beat unless you get on top of him right away and try to take him down. So the point I'm trying to make there is some strategy to the game. You see certain minions come out, and those minions, you're like, oh, this is one I got to get rid of fast. Or other ones come out and they're like, oh, you can deal with that. I'm going to go move on. So that makes the game kind of nice, and the interaction of the game. You're playing your Dice Throne characters, like I said, which your beloved Dice Throne character, if you have a favorite, then you're playing that in this dungeon crawl, which makes your characters different. There are some dungeon crawls that I have that do that you have what they refer to as an asymmetric character. But these characters are more well-rounded than most other dungeon crawls. Some of the negatives that I have for it is that when you're going through the dungeon crawl, you don't get any of the loot that you pick up right away. So I'm beating things, beating minions, turning over tiles and getting treasure chests. And so I'm getting cards, but I'm sticking those cards underneath my board and I can't use them. I don't know what they are. The whole idea of having to pay money to identify what the card is, that's kind of interesting. But getting all your reward at the very end feels a little punishing. Like I said, there are other ones that I like better, and some of those are you actually can see the minion that you're fighting, you see the weapon they have. And when you beat them, that's the weapon you get. And you can now use that weapon immediately. So that reward as you're going through is nice. Now, those dungeon crawls, to be honest, they're usually, you're through that one scenario or one dungeon and you're done. It's not really normally set up to go through multiple times like this is. You're expected to go through 8 separate scenarios. So, but that feels a little bit to me like it takes too long for me to get my rewards. So that's the dungeon crawls. For the boss fights, I think the boss fights were handled really well. I don't even think I have a negative. Like I was saying earlier, the boss fight feels like I'm fighting another person, but that's a beefier character on the other side of the table when I'm doing the boss fight. I'm not sure that I feel like they hit any harder, but they have more and they're upgraded right away, so that kind of makes them hit harder. Your character, you have to upgrade as you go along, just like in the normal game. The bosses come out pre-upgraded based on the steps, so which makes them more of a challenge, not a complaint. I'm happy with that. At the end of that fight, you get your loot right away, which feels better to me because I'm getting my loot right after the boss fight. So, those are my opinions. Again, this video is not sponsored. I bought the games. The opinions that are here are mine. So those were my opinions. A little bit of, is this game for you? I've hinted at this a few times. If you have some of the Dice Throne characters to play Dice Thrones by itself, and you like that kind of a Yahtzee combat kind of a game, and you want those characters anyway, then adding this to your collection does give you something else to do with the characters that you invested in. If you want a dungeon crawl, investing in the Dice Thrones characters and then this as the dungeon crawl seems to me to be a little bit more of an investment than normally what people would go about doing. There are, like I said, and I'll review some of those here, hopefully in the future. I have some other dungeon crawls that I feel I like better. I don't know that I have anything else that has a boss fight that feels like these boss fights, but I do have some other dungeon crawls that I like a little better. So to me, there's that investment, right? There's the dungeon crawl. If you're into dungeon crawls, the dungeon crawl of this game is pretty good. A little punishing, but its basic formula uses the same formula as most dungeon crawls. The fact that when you set up the dungeon crawl, you're picking 1 card out of, I think, 4, randomizes the layout of the dungeon pretty well. So you don't feel like you're playing it. So replayability is there. You don't feel like you're playing that same dungeon crawl every time if you try to go through it multiple times. There is a big time commitment to the game. Each time I've played a dungeon crawl, it takes 1 to 2 hours to play. Boss fights take about an hour, maybe a little less, depending upon who you're playing with. The dungeon crawl is completely cooperative. You have to cooperate with each other. You have to strategize with each other and talk to each other about what you're doing. If I'm all of a sudden, my character is about dead and I haven't finished this minion off. I need help. Can you come over and help me with this? People have to be able to be willing to do that and come over and heal. When you get to the boss fight, it's cooperative. That one common health pool in the boss fight kind of forces you to be cooperative, because if I have a character that does some kind of healing, then I'm healing the common pool. If I have a character that does a lot of DPS, then I'm doing DPS to the common foe. DPS stands for damage per second. You don't do damage per second in here, but if I'm doing a lot of damage, I'm doing damage to the common foe. So, we're forced to be cooperative. In the dungeon crawl, you could ignore the other people and say, I'm not dealing with you. I'm going to go off and do my own thing. You will fail if you do that. I think that's it. If you watch the other videos, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your time watching this one. If you could give it a like, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. Those both would be something that would help me. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, but I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.